So, Dennis, it's wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. So, before we get into your life as an author and a mentor and a guy living in recovery, I want to know first and foremost, 5 years ago, we were knee deep in this whole pandemic. We didn't know how long it was going to last, lots of unknowns. So, ultimately, how did you get through that time period? And how much of living through that has reverberated into your life today?
We were doing real estate at that time, and initially, when everything shut down, it shut down completely in the first month and a half, and that was a period of huge fear. What eventually happened was that the real estate market boomed, and that turned around pretty quickly, so that was good. But the day by day thing, we found a place to take the dogs, and every morning we'd drive out there. It was a 2 hour deal. Drive out there, let them run wild and have a good time, and drive back. And that was kind of the structure, the point of structure. And it was a good time to get away from home, and it was just a solid, peaceful couple hours, and then come back and do your daily stuff. For me personally, I spent a lot of time during then writing, finishing up my book or working on my book, and that was a good time for that. However, with the real estate market, like I said, snapped back pretty fast, and we were back at work pretty hard after that, and so it was yeah. With that, I think I found out that how much I like seeing other people because I was away from it for quite a while. And then also I think it pushed technology a little bit faster along the way, and I used a fair amount of that in my real estate work and even doing this kind of thing. So but it was a hard time, pulled through it, and better for the experience, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
let's get into the heart and soul of what you do now in 2025. I'm going to do that by putting you in front of a bunch of kids. It's career day. They're fifth graders. The kid in the back of the room is really curious and is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer him?
I'm retired from my jobs, but what I do for a job now is I write stories and I help people. And I like to write funny stories if I can. And helping people, it goes from people that are older people to people that are your age. And it's a lot of fun to do it. And when I do that, it not only helps you, but it helps me too. And and I write books, and that is fun. That is really fun to be able to do that and to put things on paper and to tell a story on paper and make sure it all goes. And that came from a lot of work doing that all through the years when I was working at other jobs.
So
But
talk to me a little bit about your jobs that led up to retirement. What was kind of the bulk of what you were doing during that time?
I at I went to college initially to be a doctor. After a year pre-med, I thought I really don't want to do this, and I took enough biology classes to go back into it if I chose to, but I didn't after. So at my junior year, then I took accounting, and I decided I would be an accountant, even though I had no clue what they did or anything. And then when I graduated with a degree in accounting, by that time I had taken a couple trips over to Europe. So as my mom said, you took 4 years of college to do that. I went to be a flight attendant, and I was a flight attendant out in Minnesota for 5 years, and then 21 years out in Seattle for a 26-year total, and flew international and domestic routes and did a lot of union work and did a lot of writing for the union newsletters, that sort of thing. And then the mechanics went on strike, and I decided that I had had enough. I'd done a lot of union work, and I wasn't going to cross their picket line. So I quit that and got my real estate license. My husband currently, he was in real estate, and so I joined him, and we made a partnership with two other women who and joined made a team and began doing real estate. And in that, I ended up doing a lot of the marketing end of it, the marketing and financial end of it. So for the whole time from basically when I got out of college to the day I retired, I never really had a boss. It was always kind of this free flowing thing, unstructured, and it was a lot of fun. And so then when I retired, that was, of course, uh, interesting, scary transition, but it
Yeah,
has been great. Uh, love love not having to go to work.
for
It's a
sure.
good thing. It's a good deal.
So let me ask you this. Take me back to your childhood. What were the foundational elements that were planted into you to see the world and to want to get into medicine and then now writing? What were those things that were sown that became who you are?
I'm the second oldest of nine kids, and we grew up a Catholic family. My father was a dentist, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. And so there was a structure of, faith and keeping things in line and um, and pretty high expectations of academics, that sort of thing. My parents were really great. I mean, my dad worked super hard. My mom, to tolerate nine kids running muck around the house is pretty admirable. I don't know how she did it. Actually, the first thing that inspired me to do any writing was in 1972. My mom was a staunch Democrat, and Richard Nixon was running for re-election. And so I borrowed my dad's typewriter, and unbeknownst to them, I wrote her a letter from the Nixon re-election campaign saying that we identified her as one of our biggest sponsors, and we were sure we could count on her for a huge donation. And I mailed it to her, and I was there when she got it in the mail. And that was to see her reaction to that was like, bingo, that is fun. Just arranging some words, putting them on paper, and you can do that kind of
That's
stuff. And,
awesome.
and that's where it started. So,
Wow.
yeah,
What about books? What was your favorite book? What was one of the gateway books that made you want to read or write?
that I don't really know. I used to read Dennis the Menace, this comic book my parents or somebody had gotten me when I was a kid. I think I still have that, and the pages are all pretty much ripped out.
Yeah.
I used to read the Hardy Boys. I kind of like that mystery and adventure kind of thing, but I wasn't a huge reader. My sister would read like crazy, but I wasn't a huge reader. What I like to read now and what I have like all along there is reading things about people, about I remember reading a thing of George Custer, and then we went to the Custer battlefield, and it was just incredible to be there and see that and think of how they lived back in those times. Yeah.
S- So I'm curious, as a flight attendant, did you get a chance to like navigate any of these cities, or were you on the plane the whole time?
No, we had a real good opportunity. The airline I flew for flew both internationally and domestic, and they had a pretty wide domestic operation. And the layovers, you would have some that were real short, and other times you would have fairly long layovers. And it gave me a huge chance to do that. You'd lay over sometimes in Boston was one of my favorite cities. Washington, D.C. was great because we usually stayed close to National Airport and were able to get downtown real easy. I mean, around the monuments and whatnot, Honolulu, and then the international layovers were generally about 18 hours. Yeah, and I did have one real long layover in Seoul, Korea, which was about 4 or 5 days, but it was the middle of winter,
Oh,
and and then I would also travel on my days off. Sometimes I went to Peru and Mexico, and we some friends went to Europe a couple times together, and that. So it was a good mix. It was
yeah.
really a lot of fun. And seeing the domestic routes and that there was all those places that I had heard about but had never been there, Florida and that. I mean, I grew up in Montana where it was very no racial no racial uh it was all white for the most part.
Yeah.
And and to get into another world out there where people were different, people believed different, people acted different, that was just fabulous fun. And it was great. It was pretty independent. You'd get a lot of flexibility in your scheduling, and you met some great people.
I'm in Kansas City, and I grew up in the '80s, so I saw that kind of whitewashing of everything. And I remember going to Europe. I was stuck in Europe during 9/11. I was in the back of a water taxi in Venice, but prior to that, I was in Paris. And that was the best mix of people that I'd ever seen. I'd never seen such a wide swath of humans, and there was such a harmony. It just floated in the air. It just felt
Hmm.
good. And I think that's the beauty. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, just when you travel, it's like you get immersed in these different cultures, and it just increases your level of empathy and understanding how people roll.
Right. Oh, definitely. And that was probably one of the greatest things I got out of that career. That and some fabulous friends that I still have.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But but then I'm from that point then after the pilot strike or the mechanic strike, I got my real estate license and worked in that, which the writing for uh, business type thing got a little bit old, so it was really fun to retire and be able to write stuff I wanted and finish at the book that I had, which was on my mentorship experience with one of my two little brothers that I'd had in the Big Brother Big Sister program. So
So let me ask you this: who has been an inspiration for you in your career and otherwise? Someone that's been an inspirational force or a hero?
an inspirational force in uh, my life, probably without a doubt, would be my father.
Yeah.
He's 95, and to see what he did for our family and the nine of us, and to be there for us, and to be able to feed the family of that size and take us on vacations and come home and treat my mother with total respect and be a partner to help her. And still at his age, until yesterday, he fell yesterday, but he would get out of bed every morning and make his coffee. And I'm fortunate to have eight brothers and sisters there that everybody has pitched in. And then probably in business wise, it would be my husband, Joe. When we went through the real estate mess in 2008, it was
Yeah.
probably 4 years after we had started real estate. That was a horribly difficult time because you had clients that were trying to sell their houses that couldn't do it. You had to keep going. You had to keep marketing. You had to hang in there. And he had an incredible knack that I saw to keep positive, keep our team together, keep everybody moving, keep everybody pulled through that. And it really paid off. And seeing him, even though I I've known him, we've been together for 40 years, to see him do that, it was a real inspiration that, okay, you get up every morning, you do something to make it to make it work and keep it going.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. So those are the two of the biggest influences on my life. My mother also was tremendous. Her and my father both had great sense of humors, and you never knew what was going to happen. But she would, like, for example, on April Fool's Day, you'd get your brown bag lunch and go to school, and then you'd open it up and you'd forget it's April Fool's Day, and you'd pull out a cookie, and 90% of the time it was Oreo cookie with ivory soap stuffed in the middle of it, you know.
Oh,
And the last time she did it, I got these chocolate ones and I thought they were pretty neat. There was chocolate swirled into them. And I took one bite and almost spit it out. It was horrid. But what she had done was had ground up a bunch of liver and then made a batch of liver cookies and put them in our lunches.
oh,
That kind of stuff. She loved doing that kind of stuff. And
that's
so,
crazy. Oh man.
yeah.
So before we depart all the travels that you went on, what was one of the most unexpectedly magical places that you went to that just blew you away? You didn't expect it.
I what I probably one time that really amazed me, we flew into Tokyo, was my probably my first trip over to Tokyo, which was out in Narita, away from the downtown. It was all reclaimed farmland, land that they had taken from the people to build this airport. But to see the people out there in those little straw hats with the points and bent over and working in the rice paddies and that, it was like, this is just right out of the travel guide. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe that this is really what's happening. And that to me was pretty impressive. It would because it was so much like I expected it to be, or
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be because it was like it was supposed to be, kind of thing. Yeah, yeah.
So what's the sushi like? Are you a big sushi fan?
No, I'm not. No,
Okay.
over there the menu was usually noodles, gyoza, and a lot of beer.
I gotcha.
But
I gotcha. Yeah, see, I'm a sushi guy, and I just keep thinking if I was to spend some time over there, I would be in heaven eating sushi every day.
oh
Just
yeah,
absolutely would. So,
yeah. I've
um,
never I've never developed a taste for it.
I
So
gotcha. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So let me ask you this. How do you, and especially when you were a professional before retirement, was it big for you to find a balance every day between your personal life and your business life? How do you kind of go in with that philosophy on to making yourself happy and taking care of your own soul?
It has always been a a bit a challenge to do that to do that. When I got into recovery, that helped me get some peace and really get some focus. And I have had friends that are very big on self-care and preach that message to me, and that has helped balance things out. And I think I try to work really hard at it. I have come to the point where with writing, I learned that you can't keep writing and writing and writing the same thing. At some point, you have to, it's good enough and put it out. So that really attacks the perfectionist in me. But it also, and I live life like that. It's kind of okay, at some point I can do yard work, but I can only do it for like an hour at a time.
Yeah.
As my husband can go 8 hours straight, and I just can't. And I was like, okay, this is my what I can do. And you begin to accept what you like to do, and that the more you work on doing what you like to do, the better that balance becomes, I think.
Well, that's a part of being on this planet long enough, though. You find your threshold. And then when you
Mhm.
get to that point where you're old enough, you're like, I'm just not doing it. I'm just not even going to pretend that it's okay.
Yeah,
You
and,
know?
that's a great stage to hit.
Yeah, it is a really
Yeah.
good stage.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. If you were to be put in front of a room of people that know you in a business sense, whether it's, in the flight industry or in real estate, and you walk into that room and you go up to the podium and you can tell them one fun story about your life, one fun thing, something that would humanize you, that would make them look at you a little different, maybe the first concert or just a great adventure, what would you tell that room?
It would probably be that, and this kind of defines how I think. When I was a little kid, I was riding my bike down the street, and for some reason, it popped into my head. I wonder how blind kids ride bikes. So I shut my eyes and
Oh,
smashed into a tree and survived.
oh
So
no.
that would be that pretty much describes how I operate. You gotta just smash into it. That I like to look at things with a kind of a skewed eye and a sense of humor in that, and that kind of, yeah, I'd probably take off after my mother from the sense of humor point. That would probably be it. That you don't know. I'm kind of a loner. I'm shy. And you wouldn't know that if you knew me for a while, but that's the case. And I also believe really strongly that anything that I have gone through in my life that has been difficult, that I can benefit that because I can help somebody else out with it, whether it be struggles around my sexuality, whether it be how to get through that real estate crisis, whether it be getting sober, any of those sort of things. Eventually you do it and then you make it through it and you come through that. And I tell that a lot of times to these teens that we go visit in the juvenile lockup. And it's a group of recovering men that go over there periodically and just tell them, hey, whatever you go through here, if you turn it around, you can then help some other kid that's your age and maybe help your brothers and sisters stay away from getting in trouble, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
that's a real important message that I've learned is what I've gone through has what was the worst parts of my life have been the best parts because it helps me help somebody else with it.
I had that, I still do. I have that daredevil bone in me. And when I was a kid, we used to have this big hill, and I thought for some reason I could pop up and twist my wheel around because I don't think I had traditional brakes.
Uh,
And man, I wiped out so bad. I just came home like I was just blood and everything. All it was, but it's that thing where it's like can I do it? I just want to know if I can do it, you know? And it's that invincibility of youth, I guess,
right, right.
you know?
I had the same sort of thing where I wanted to do a wheelie, so I was going down the street doing wheelies, and the front tire fell off.
Oh no, that's bad.
It's kid. When you're an adult, you're like, how did we survive to this age? It's
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
It is
Yeah,
incredible, especially in that unfettered era of like the 80s, the amount of things that I had the freedom to do and the wrecks and the things. It's like, yeah, how we survived and made it here. It's crazy,
right.
you
Yeah,
know?
there's a good book I read was Stingray Saturdays, but it talks about this kid growing up in the 80s in Bloomington, Minnesota, and having lived in Minnesota in that area when I was flying out there. It was just he is really great on details, and him and his brothers just got into all kinds of trouble and all kinds of stupid junk that they did. But it was just like reliving that whole period,
Yeah.
you know. I
Yeah.
mean. the days when like crank calls on telephones were a great pastime, a great pastime. And then somebody invented caller ID, and yeah, there goes,
That's
there
it.
goes your fun. Yeah.
That business is over with. So I'm curious, with everything that you've overcome and lived through and evolved to at this point in your life, if you were to have a dream tonight and you could run into your 18-year-old self and give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've accumulated, what advice would you impart?
I would tell him to take a deep breath and know that all this, the kind of worry, the self-centeredness or that you have that about what's everybody thinking about me, all your friends at the same area are going through the same thing. And just realize that you have potential, get to know the people around you, be willing to ask people for help because that's where you're going to find a lot of help is from other people. And again, whatever you go through, when you sooner or later you'll be glad you went through it and you'll be able to help somebody else with it. Um, and that's, that's I lived for many, many years, around my sexual orientation, the fear of that and being closeted and all that stress, and the stress almost killed me. And it's, you find out that, hey, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm at in life, and I can make good use of that. So because I think that's what I can remember about that age is being real uptight about what do people think of me. And as you get to my my age, and it's like, oh, who cares?
Right.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
but it sounds like you have wonderful parents. Were they good? Did you have anything that was, that made it more difficult for you to be who you are?
I would think the implied the the Catholic religion, the Catholic dogma, you don't, it's a sin, don't do that, don't tell other people what's going on, that sort of thing made it hard for me. Uh, and the first time I got intoxicated and came home as a kid and got sick all over the house. My mother, about 2 days later, finally talked to me and she said, "Don't ever do that again." And I said, I wouldn't. And what she meant was, don't ever drink again. And what I meant was, don't get caught again. That's how I lived life for quite a while. But yeah, I mean, there was pressure to conform, pressure to keep in line. And with that many people, that has to be there in order to keep the order in the house and whatnot. And they were very, very good parents. But kids, when you're you're a teenager, life is free. Nothing. You're not afraid of anything. You're just out to have fun. And I still made good grades and all that, which that was kind of always making sure that you were toeing the line academically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? It's amazing you were talking about talking to these kids and being an example for them, or illuminating the idea that they can have examples in their lives that will help them through tough times. And I watched this show. It's totally captured my mind. It's on Netflix called The Turnaround. It's about the baseball player Trey Turner. And there's a Philadelphia Phillies fan, which Philadelphia tends to have rough fans for
Right.
sports. So basically, they go through this whole story of his life where he got to a really bad place and was institutionalized because he thought he was going to take his own life, and his parents were there for him. And then all of a sudden, it goes into this segue of how they all just obliterated Trey Turner when he got traded from the Dodgers to Phillies. He wasn't doing good. Everybody was yelling at him. All of a sudden, this guy had an epiphany. What if we all did a standing ovation until he gets a hit? So he put it out on social media. It became a thing. It was on all the TV, and it was unreal. And it was the Royals they were playing, and it's absolutely unbelievable what they did for this guy. He came up to bat, and everybody was cheering. He gets a hit. He went on fire for the rest of the season, like a month and a half. They almost went to the World Series, and it was because they decided love. They decided to do something that was benevolent. And this guy learned from his parents. In the darkest hour, they were there for him. And I think
Hmm.
about this example of what you're doing. All of us have that choice, and every little minute thing that you can do in this reality may have an effect on somebody else and totally change the world.
Yeah. And it can be real small stuff too. That's where the mentoring stuff that I have done with big brothers, and that I've had two little brothers, and the second one is I wrote the book about, and that was a 13-year lesson in total acceptance. He had handicapped, and he was a real challenge for a lot of that, and I worked with him for lot of years with where it was a lot of fun, and he was just lovable, happy, go lucky, and then he developed mental illness, and then how that goes after that. But again, it's a thing of how can I help somebody, but what do I get out of it, which is always a reward, not thinking what am I getting out of it. You go into thinking, well, maybe I'll help this kid out, save his life, but it doesn't work that way. You're just you got that gift of presence that you show up, and that's what's important. And people feel that. People feel that in all areas of life. And I think that's a real great challenge to our society right now, is for people to step up and help somebody else. The isolation that was starting to COVID, and also the political divisions and fear and stuff that's spread around now, it really separates people, and that's hard on us, and it's probably really really hard on the younger people too,
I think it's
because yeah,
yeah. I
that's
think
where
it's
it's really hits.
I think it's probably the hardest on them. You know, years ago I used to work at a YMCA. I ran a couple labs in inner city areas. And so I'm just this long-haired white guy running a couple of labs, and it's predominantly either Hispanic or black. And my partner used to be a football player for Oklahoma, so he was this big dude. So they knew when if they crossed the line, all he had to do was just like show his muscles, and that was it. It was over with. But I remember there was one kid in particular that stole some money from somebody that was um, an ELL class or a computer class, and it was really bad, and I was really upset. And this kid just continued to be a nuisance. And I remember I told Phil, I said, I just can't take this kid. What are we gonna do? And he just stopped and he looked at me and he said, we have to give this kid love. We have to do something that's completely opposite of everything that he's getting. Because I'm sure he's getting raised by his grandparents. Everything in his community, everything on all these music videos he's watching is just this glorification of things that are going to do no good for him, and it's just going
Hmm.
to up his anger and anxiety. Anyway, my point is that those small acts, and we did, and it actually really helped him, was that we embraced him. We did something that was anterior to everything that he was seeing in his community, and we were just showing him love, just for the reason to do it, not for what we're going to get out of it, but just this kid needs somebody to believe in him. And
Right.
I don't know whatever happened to him, but I know that helps a lot better, especially in these very weird 2025 divisive times of just things that are going south right now with
Right.
with this administration and what they're doing to us.
I read a book by Daniel Robb where he had worked in a juvenile camp that was on an island for kids that were in trouble, and he'd worked there for a couple of years, and finally or about a year and a half, and he finally asked one of his coworkers, he goes, "Do you think we're making any difference in this?" And the guy thought for a minute, and the guy told him, "Well, I think we've turned a couple potential murderers into car thieves. So yeah, we're doing all right." Then it was just a good perspective of looking at it. It's,
Yeah,
you know, yeah.
that is
And then we
amazing.
get something out of it too. Like, I mean, you think you're connecting with these kids and all that, and then we start talking about music one night over there, and this kid asked me if I knew this band or that band, and I said no, no, I didn't know that. And then he stops and looks at me, he goes, "Oh, you were born in the 1900s, weren't you?" I was like, yeah, me and my dinosaur walked to school together, because that's what it felt like he was saying. So no, I don't know the band, but it put me right in my place. Yeah, I am a little older than you are.
Yeah, that's great. So, did you ever watch the show Monk?
No, I was a little past that.
Well, I've rewatched it, and it's about he's got these extra powers of finding out crimes, and he's OCD and all of this. Well, they did a reboot and they did a movie, and he loves it because it's COVID times, and he gets to put sanitizer on all over the place, and he gets to be sterilized. But there's one point in the end where he's questioning his life. I'm solving all these murders for people that are gone. What difference am I making? And he was really upset. And all of a sudden, he had this vision of all these family members and people that came in and explained to him what he did and how it reverberated and rippled out. And it's like
Uh-huh.
those things. There's so many things that are done that none of us will ever know, will ever
Right.
understand, you know? So
Yeah.
it's wild. So let me ask you this: of everything that you've done and accomplished and evolved into in your life, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
To work with my two little brothers. I'm involved actually in a third program with Big Brothers right now, and still in the initial part of that. He's pretty high strung, and you have to, you know, tie him down to
Yeah.
talk to him.
Yeah.
But the first I met when he was 11, and I was with him for 4 years, and then continued on, and kept in touch with him when I moved, and was his best man in his wedding and his godfather to his son, and we became really good friends. He came out here on vacations and whatnot, and he passed away in November last year from an accident at work, a truck driving accident. And then my second little brother was the handicapped kid that I talk about in my book, Stick Figures: A Big Brother Remembers. And that whole adventure, from meeting him as this little kid that was full of joy and handicapped with speech therapy, speech problems and whatnot, into the fun years of that, and then the mental illness hitting, and then making the choice to continue on with him and to continue on to him, so that he had somebody in his past, or somebody that he solid, that he knew he could count on to show up every couple of weeks and whatnot, as he went through that. And it was a rewarding story to help me become a better man, that whole experience. And so that was what I finished after I retired and got that out. And yeah, without a doubt, I'm proudest of that because of what I learned from it, and because I was able to do it, and I was given that opportunity to have him as my little brother, and see exactly how hard it is for people with mental health issues to find housing, how hard it is for the families, all that sort of thing. But it was just a real good experience for me, and I'll never regret any of the times I spent with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, colleagues, everyone that reads your books, everyone that knows you, that you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
At this point in my life, I feel pretty comfortable that I'm an honest person, that I am pretty steady, that I'm a real reliable friend, that likes to enjoy himself, and it is somebody I can be relied upon. And I am blessed to be in a happy relationship and have the gifts I've been given. But I don't ever forget that those gifts I need to work on to, maintain my sobriety, and also to share the good things in my life with other people. And if it helps them, it helps them. If it doesn't, it helps me stay centered.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to pick up your books, they want to reach out, they got any questions, any of the good work in your world, where do they go?
My website is djquinnauthor.com, and the books are for sale there. And some of that, they're also available on Amazon. But yeah, they could get it from my website, djquinnauthor.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. I
So,
will put that in the show notes and
okay.
get it out there. Dennis, wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time, and keep spreading the light out there.
Thank you. And I enjoy your show. You do a really good job with your
Thank you.
interviews, and you've got some great guests.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.